Survival of the Fittest. In the 1859 book, Origin of Species, Darwin proposed the scientific explanation of biodiversity in nature, that life on Earth arose from a common ancestor through his theory of evolution. Further works by Darwin, such as The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals and The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, elaborated on the role of human evolution and sexual selection, advancing his theory of evolution. While evidential and scientific support for evolution has been overwhelming, the origin of species and man remains a widely accepted consensus within the academic community. Yet, the evolutionary mechanism behind it and certain details about its operation remain unresolved. Selection pressure. Selection pressure refers to the continuous force exerted by the external environment during a species' evolution, which influences the direction of evolution. Nature's selection pressure on an individual organism makes it susceptible to the fate of survival or elimination, along with the genes it carries. Adapting to the natural environment is the only way to survive and reproduce. This concept is better recognized within the context of sexual selection, and less so within that of natural and reproductive selection. Sexual selection theory elucidates how competition for mating opportunities among individuals of the same sex, frequently males, contributes to the evolution of traits. In most species with two sexes, at least one sex usually competes for limited mating opportunities. Heritable differences between individuals contribute to competition success, enabling more successful individuals to pass these advantageous traits to their offspring. This is what is known as sexual selection evolution. This evolutionary theory is relatively easy for human adults to understand, since we experience the pressures of sexual selection firsthand in our relationships and marriages. Sexual selection pressure in humans varies by sex, but neither the selection criteria nor the perception of male or female selection is significantly different among individuals. Sexual selection pressure in some animals is stronger for one sex, with sexual selection acting mainly on male traits. In contrast, fishes of the Sailorhinidae family, such as seahorses, have opposite sex roles with sexual selection acting mainly on female traits. The impact of natural selection and reproductive selection can be observed in the survival rate of individuals and the number of offspring, respectively. However, individuals themselves do not experience the pressure directly. There is little information available regarding the precise mechanism by which these two pressures affect a population or species. The two selection pressures seem to be descriptions of an analogous selection process, which cannot be precisely determined with accuracy. Biomolecular scientists have employed genetic algorithms to investigate selection pressure through the adaptation ratio. To determine whether selection is acting on this protein coding gene, they employed Ca per kilosecond. Ca per kilosecond is the ratio of non-synonymous substitutions Ca to synonymous substitutions Ks. They denoted nucleotide variants that result in amino acid alterations as non-synonymous mutations, and those that do not as synonymous mutations. While non-synonymous mutations are subject to natural selection, synonymous mutations are not. This research focuses on the outcome of selection pressure, not the process of action. Is natural selection pressure present in individuals? As per Moto Kimura, the majority of mutations are neutral at the molecular level. The law of genetic information flow in biomolecular science is DNA-RNA protein. A triplet codon made up of 3 bases encodes an amino acid during the translation of nucleic acid into protein. If only the 3rd base of the triplet codon is mutated without affecting the encoded amino acid, this phenomenon is referred to as codon simplicity. In several instances, mutations in amino acids do not change the functional regions of protein structure. Within the genome, there are numerous non-coding regions, and mutations in these regions do not impact protein translation. According to Moto Kimura's base and protein mutation rate calculations, it was concluded that these mutations typically do not affect the function of biological macromolecules. It was concluded that the majority of mutations are neutral and have no significant effect on individuals. According to the concept of neutral mutations, the mutation process is not influenced by selection pressure, or maybe not influenced by it at all. Nonetheless, after a random genetic drift, neutral mutations either attain fixation or vanish from the population, which implies that selection pressure exists, but it acts differently and at different times. Selection pressure can also be viewed as manageable, and it may be imposed, removed, relaxed, or enhanced. According to Terence Deacon of the University of California, Berkeley, natural selection's absence drives the evolutionary process in significant yet unrecognized ways. According to him, when selection pressure is lifted, the genome starts to drift, leading to a series of fascinating and interacting effects. Additionally, he argues that selection pressures affect different genes independently. For instance, the agricultural revolution led to the abundance, palatability, and digestibility of food, reducing the selection pressure on our digestive system. As the evolution of these traits stabilizes, more energy can be allocated to other functions, such as building and operating a larger brain. In this way, the decrease in selection pressure is a crucial aspect of the broader evolutionary process. This argument suggests that nature has an effortless task. In case the organism does not offer distinct material with more variations, nature halts the evolutionary process. Furthermore, it can freely determine the length and pace of its action based on the circumstances. The theory of intermittent equilibrium likewise presents a comparable concept. According to intermittent equilibrium theory, most species experience minimal evolutionary changes over geological time, remaining in a static state, with significant evolutionary changes occurring predominantly in relatively rare and rapidly evolving lineages. According to this theory, the overall shape of the evolutionary tree, according to research, tends to be a stepped shape, with branches almost straight and going up most of the time, occasionally branching into new, almost horizontal branches for short periods, unlike sinuous and smooth branches. The intermittent equilibrium theory proposes a positive correlation between selection and evolutionary rate. Ernst Mayr, a German evolutionary biologist, proposed the concept of parapatric speciation, which suggests that few new populations that leave the old environment encounter tremendous selection pressure in the new environment, which results in an increased evolutionary rate. When the level of adaptation and the number of individuals increase, the selection pressure reduces, which leads to a slower evolution. Many theories suggest that selection pressures are unpredictable and elusive on the evolutionary tree. Given that selection pressures are sporadic, unpredictable, and real, how do genes detect their location and intensity? How do they intermittently give nature one selection question after another? Although Darwin used the phrase survival of the fittest to describe natural selection, it can be argued that this concept was not originally his own, but rather borrowed from the British sociologist Herbert Spencer. This phrase amplifies selection pressures to the point where they may seem cruel and frightening, potentially causing guilt in people's perceptions. However, it is important to consider whether the existing species truly represents the fittest. Survival of the fittest refers to a comparison of extreme pressures that represent a mode of selection. However, it is also possible that the least fit can be eliminated by a different model. The question then becomes whether natural selection rewards the best or punishes the worst. What constitutes the standard for selection pressure? Frequently, various differences in traits concerning morphology, structure, behavior, and habits can be observed among organisms in the same habitat, but some of these traits are not superior or inferior. In most situations, natural selection appears to eliminate harmful genes instead of preserving the beneficial ones, while neutral mutations, which may not provide direct advantages to an organism, are likely to persist since they also may not cause any harm. Can organisms mutate at will due to nature's generosity? The human genome has approximately 20,000 genes, but only 1.2% of the entire genome, although some scientists believe this proportion has reached about 8%, can code, while the remainder, known as non-coding DNA or junk DNA, cannot. The same is true for the onion, which has a genome 5 times larger than the human genome, where most of the DNA called junk is not functional. Some biologists argue that only a small fraction of non-coding DNA in plants and animals serves a biological purpose, suggesting that the majority of it is likely to be useless. The complexity of the genomes of plants and animals may seem like an artifact, which could appear surprising at first. Still, the non-coding DNA percentage is too high to dismiss the possibility that it is an artifact. It is impressive that nature has overlooked the disarray of the junk in plant and animal cells. What is the explanation for this? Is this due to the erratic evolution of plants and animals, or the inability of nature to control it, or simply because nature is not inclined to intervene? The evolutionary tree with luxuriant foliage. This planet sustains a vast range of organisms, including animals, plants, microorganisms, fungi, and quasi-biological viruses. Their diversity creates an ecological paradise. From the Cambrian explosion to the present day, a vast number of species, both extant and extinct, have existed. There is no conclusive evidence of a massive ecological decline in species on Earth. The extinction events of biological clusters, speculated by some scientists, do not prove that all branches of evolution have experienced significant declines. An asteroid impact or a major geological catastrophe would likely damage only the top of the food chain or devastate a significant proportion of species in a given geographic area. According to a study by the Census of Marine Life at the University of Hawaii and Dalhousie University in Canada, there are an estimated 8.7 million species on Earth today, plus or minus 1.3 million, with 6.5 million living on land and 2.2 million residing in deep oceans. The evolutionary tree's various branches are distributed throughout every corner of the planet. The ecologically hostile Antarctic region hosts more than 700 species of algae and about 1,150 species of fungi. Furthermore, both polar regions have more than 235 species of marine organisms in common. What is the reason behind nature's preference for diversity? Does the principle of survival of the fittest invariably result in biodiversity? It appears that the survival of the fittest in evolutionary theory does not account for biodiversity. In fact, there seems to be a fundamental contradiction between these concepts. The level of biological diversity is not only significant but also astonishing. Species retain their diversity wherever they are, although the degree of diversity may vary between regions. Additionally, their abundance can be compared to the stars visible in a clear night sky. Tropical rainforests are characterized by dense and diverse tree growth, with multiple layers occupied by various species. Underwater hot springs support the presence of bacteria, as well as a variety of amphipods, copepods, fish, crustaceans, tubeworms, and octopuses. 300 new species were discovered at hydrothermal vents in 1993. The evidence suggests that in evolutionary selection, nature prefers multiple-choice questions over single-choice questions. Yet nature seems to have erred in its selection of the diversity of human evolution. Another way of stating it is that among nature's offspring, humans are the most rebellious because they deliberately went against the natural evolution trajectory and broke the rules of the family of biodiversity set by nature. As a result, human beings, being members of the human family and the human genus under the order of primates, ended up with only one species, Homo sapiens, which refers to modern-day human beings. The evolution of humanity appears to be akin to a story of domestic violence. Nature seemed to have been in a violent state between 30,000 and 2 million years ago. During that time period, nature selectively allowed the evolution of some species within the genus Homo, and mercilessly eradicated nearly 20 other species, such as Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo denisovans, and Homo neanderthal, eventually leaving behind only a single surviving species, Homo sapiens. However, the story takes a dramatic turn since, as a single species, Homo sapiens has managed to evolve and reach a population size of over 7 billion people as of today, defying nature's preference for diversity and leaving Homo sapiens isolated on the evolutionary tree. One might wonder if this could be nature's way of compensating for what might be regarded as its post-rampage remorse. What is the natural selection mechanism that causes the paradox between diversity and non-diversity? This question leads to a series of further questions. Evolutionary theory postulates that organisms evolve in order to adapt better to their environments. Despite being the oldest unicellular organisms on Earth, algae and bacteria which live in water still maintain their original way of life and remain fundamental to the ecological pantheon. Given that they can still adapt to their environment, what incentive would have driven these organisms to evolve into multicellular organisms at that particular moment in time? If those primitive organisms and others on the evolutionary tree do not participate in the evolutionary process, what is the purpose of evolution? As we examine the evolutionary tree, we notice that after multicellular organisms evolved into simple aquatic organisms, the plot became more complex and captivating. One group of aquatic organisms ceased to evolve and remained in the comforting environment of seawater, benefiting from the ample abundance of food it provides. Another group, however, refused to be stagnant and instead evolved in an unfamiliar direction, becoming terrestrial animals by venturing onto land. This process is undoubtedly riddled with hardships and considerable unknown risks on land. Therefore, what drives certain organisms to continue evolving in the same environment while others come to a halt? What are the evolutionary factors that impel adventurers to venture onto land? An evolutionary tree was utilized to describe the evolutionary connections among species with shared ancestry. The nearest common ancestor of each branch is represented by each node in the tree, and the length of the line segment between nodes corresponds to the evolutionary distance or time interval. The family tree of the insect world is predominantly represented in a single family tree that occupies most of the branch area on the evolutionary tree. It can be argued that insects play a crucial role in the planet's ecosystem. Insects account for 73% of all known animal species. Even when considering the entire biosphere of the Earth, including all species of plants, fungi, bacteria, viruses, etc., insects still comprise 53% of the total number of species. The diversity of insects is significantly greater than that of all other vertebrates and invertebrates combined. Insects, despite their small size, make up more than half of all living creatures on Earth. This fact in itself is astonishing. It is intriguing to consider how insects have achieved such a phenomenal level of diversity. Insects are believed to possess a level of intelligence and awareness that surpasses that of most other species. They are evidently aware of the limitations of natural selection and its underlying mechanisms. Current studies reveal that bacteria can undergo evolution via horizontal gene transfer. This process occurs through DNA sharing. Bacteria can specifically target DNA fragments commonly shared among other bacteria in their environment, including fragments from deceased bacteria. By integrating these DNA fragments into their genome, bacteria can evolve new traits with higher survivability, such as greater resistance to antibiotics. Bacteria then proceed to share and exchange these fragments, thereby spreading the trait among the bacterial population. The discovery of this evolutionary process contradicts the notion that bacterial evolution is slow or stagnant, which was previously held. Excluding the contribution of human use of antibiotics in bacterial evolution, could it be that bacterial evolution has continued to evolve along this path until now? Constructing an evolutionary history for bacterial branches on the evolutionary tree using fossilized morphological evidence may not be possible. However, The demonstrated horizontal gene transfer technology in bacteria suggests that the evolution and iteration on the bacterial branches of the evolutionary tree may be far denser than previously imagined. The evolutionary tree and its corresponding theories do not fully explain the mysteries of the mind. It is possible that our understanding has been flawed from the start, but where exactly did we make our mistake? Is domestication an evolutionary pathway? Among the evolutionary branches, some species have been domesticated. Around 20,000 to 15,000 BC, humans started utilizing and taming other creatures, mainly as a source of food, clothing, and transportation, for protection, or for amusement and decoration. Gradually, humans acquired the skills to grow different crops, domesticate livestock and pets, and subsequently breed them to enhance certain traits. On the other hand, traits animals possessed that were not significant to humans gradually diminished. Can the direct manipulation of the distribution of plant and animal genes be considered as natural selection? Since the domestication of the first plants and animals, humans have continued to domesticate many species up to the present day, mainly through the agricultural revolution. Using dogs as an example, it is notable that all dog breeds belong to the same subspecies of wolves according to animal taxonomy. Human selective breeding has resulted in all existing dog breeds being classified as variants that belong to this subspecies. According to available statistics, there are approximately 700 to 800 known dog breeds, and almost half of them can be differentiated strictly based on certain characteristics. The earliest wolf dogs closely resembled their wild ancestors in appearance, although they were most likely smaller and exhibited more docile traits. It is possible that humans chose them, or vice versa. Nevertheless, these evolutionary changes have resulted in a symbiotic relationship between wolfhounds and humans. It is reasonable to assume that during the domestication process, the wolf dogs were initially wild, and our ancestors unconsciously selected the docile ones by eliminating the aggressive individuals. The result was a significant shift in the behavior of the first generation of dogs, who understood the subordination in their symbiotic relationship. After thousands of years of evolution, dogs have acquired the ability to comprehend human language, expressions, and actions. Dogs might have learned to bark and move in a manner that allows humans to comprehend their emotional and cooperative signals, leading to a direct form of communication. By dividing the domestication process into two phases, it is possible to identify inconsistencies and hints of problem areas. The initial phase is self-domestication, going from wolves to wolf dogs, from wolf dogs to dogs, and then from a few breeds to hundreds of breeds. Could this process be attributed to their proactive behavior? According to biologist Richard Dawkins, the initial stage of domesticating dogs involves an evolution similar to the concept of safe distances that is achieved through natural selection rather than artificial selection. Reducing the safety distance between humans and dogs is a behavioral trait that can be attributed to an increase in tameness. During this stage, humans do not actively choose the gentlest dogs for breeding purposes. During the early stages of this process, the interactions between humans and dogs were only confrontational in nature. If wolves were domesticated, it would have happened by self-domestication, and deliberate domestication would have come later. His opinions suggest that natural selection may have pressured wolves, leading to an increase in tameness genes that enabled them to form a mutually beneficial relationship with humans that were more resourceful. Considering this, it is likely that other animals and plants that humans have domesticated, such as pigs, sheep, horses, rice, and corn, have also undergone natural selection through a similar process. As animals have a more vital and proactive feeding ability compared to plants, why has nature allowed some of them to be domesticated beyond a mutualistic level? Domestication and mutualism are distinct concepts. Domestication implies subordinate relationship with a deeper, relatively dependent symbiosis, whereas mutualism is a cooperative relationship where two individuals are independent but exist in some way to help each other. In his book, Mutualism, An Element of Evolution, the Russian geographer Pyotr Kropotkin analyzes animal behavior, and he argues that animals improve their chances of survival by cooperating with each other. Consequently, evolution proceeds by increasing the degree of cooperation in each generation, and successfully developed traits in animal groups can be transmitted and strengthened in future generations. Cooperation's purpose is a short-term benefit that improves present survival, which individuals can understand and accept without objection. However, the outcome of domestication is so far-reaching and long-term for domesticated animals that it appears to be a strategic evolutionary objective. Plants and animals that humans have domesticated have achieved great biological success. In the book From Animals into Gods, A Brief History of Humankind, the Israeli historian Yuval Harari describes it thus: viewing the agricultural revolution through the lens of wheat, it was just one of many weeds in a small area of the Middle East 10,000 years ago. Within a span of just 1,000 years, wheat quickly spread across the globe. Wheat's success in the evolutionary history of the planet can arguably be attributed to its ability to survive and reproduce efficiently. Can the domestication of plants and animals be considered an evolutionary strategy under natural selection? Why have other plants and animals not followed this strategy and achieved success? According to evolutionary biologist Jared Diamond in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, out of the 148 species of terrestrial herbivorous large wild mammals worldwide that are potential candidates for domestication, only 14 have succeeded. Diamond explains that the reasons for this are varied, including large food intake which is uneconomical, slow growth rate which makes them unsuitable for domestication, reproductive shyness, which involves reluctance to mate in public or having a more complicated mating process, and a fierce temperament which makes it difficult to tame them as they may eat or bite people. Furthermore, a tendency to be easily frightened is another factor to consider. Although this explanation may seem like an afterthought, we should inquire, why haven't these creatures, which were destined to be wild forever, undergone the same mutation as wolves since 10,000 years ago? It is imaginable how offended they would be while answering this question. Can't I lose weight if you dislike my large food? Can't I consume more nutritious food and exercise more if you dislike my slow growth rate? If I appear hesitant to breed, is it possible that I could overcome this reluctance with more attempts? I desire to modify my innate wild behavior. Can I please have an opportunity to do so? If humans provide me with protection, I will be less susceptible to fear. If not image like that, could it be due to their aversion to being subjugated and unwillingness to yield to another species with a significant genetic difference? Is it possible that they are the neglected offspring of nature? Now, let's move on to another stage of the domestication process, which is artificial selection. Homo sapiens is a product of natural selection, so the artificial selection done by Homo sapiens could be considered a part of natural selection. To put it differently, Homo sapiens is an instrument of nature, authorized by it to carry out natural selection on domesticated animals and plants. Artificial selection appears to weaken the law of survival of the fittest. In contrast, the law of survival of the favored becomes stronger, leading to a possible conflict with the universal law of natural selection. Natural selection, in the broad sense, certainly encompasses the complete concept of artificial selection, which refers to the indirect selection resulting from human non-breeding behavior. The natural selection law in itself presents an intriguing paradox. Has it been also the result of natural selection that thousands of years of human activities, such as mass hunting and killing, territorial expansion and pollution, have caused the extinction of a large number of wild plants and animals that are not easily domesticated? Studies suggest that, had it not been for human intervention and destruction, approximately 90 vertebrate species would have gone extinct every 100 years, along with an average of one vascular plant every 27 years, over the past 200 million years. However, the human intervention has significantly increased the extinction rate of birds and mammals by a factor of 100 to 1,000. By definition, if this is considered artificial selection, then nature should question its own judgment regarding the assigning of the ability to artificially select to humans. If we strictly differentiate between artificial selection and natural selection, should we not reconstruct the evolutionary tree differently for the unique symbiotic behavior of domestication? If we add every node of symbiotic evolution to the evolutionary tree, the biological evolutionary history becomes more complicated and remarkable than anticipated. An interesting instance of domestication is the Bengal finch, a bird that has been under human care for centuries due to its attractive plumage. The plumage of Bengal finches typically displays combinations of white, black, and brown. One variety of the bird has silvery plumage, resembling snow whites, that is particularly beautiful. However, it is not this feature that makes the bird so popular. Rather, its unique and distinct personality, known for being social and friendly towards humans, as well as its intricate song, are what attract people to it. However, the white-rumped bunting, which is the closest relative in the wild, appears to be quite distinct, which may lead to confusion. The white-rumped bunting produces a simple and predictable call and displays a very timid and shy disposition. What accounts for the evolution of certain delicate characteristics that are more intimate with humans, in the case of the domesticated bird with its beautiful color? Finally, we will explore the unconscious world of organisms, that is, the relationship between organisms and bacteria. Over the last decade, researchers have established that the human body is not a self-sufficient entity, but instead, a complex ecosystem that resembles a prominent society. Our bodies harbor trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms. Bacteria inhabit our skin, genitals, mouth, and other parts, including the intestines. Human cells are not the most abundant in the human body. Instead, 10 times more symbiotic bacteria are present. The symbiotic relationship between these bacteria and human cells is not inherent. Most bacteria are obtained directly from the mother's uterus and birth canal during birth. A few are acquired by contact with bacteria in the environment, followed by the gradual establishment of specific symbiotic communities. Beneficial symbiotic bacteria in a mutually beneficial relationship provide the digestive enzymes necessary to break down, synthesize, and absorb nutrients in the body and defend against harmful bacteria. These probiotic bacteria play an important role in the evolutionary process of humans and seem to surpass the typical symbiotic relationship. Is the process of accepting beneficial bacteria and establishing symbiotic relationships in the human body considered a form of domestication, despite humans being previously unaware of it?